Hey Optimants, it's Chris here. So I am completing my analysis of classes from the playtest packet 5 for 1D&D with the analysis of the Wizard class. And this one shouldn't take as long as the Warlock. The Warlock was very daunting because there was just so much stuff to cover. With the Wizard, we're going to actually spend most of our time talking about 2 new spells they get, because a lot of other stuff is very similar to what it was before. But speaking of my Warlock video, I do have an update. So I got an email from Jeremy Crawford. He says, "Hi Chris, did you get the 1,000 subs?" Because that's what he said would be required for him to give the Warlock more spells. So I replied to him, I said, "Hi Jeremy, I got almost 300 new subs. That is amazing for this channel for a single video." And I have some really bad news, because he sent me back a reply, and here's what it said. It said, "That is unacceptable. I said 1,000 subs. No fooling around anymore. If you don't get 1,000 subs on your next video, I'm using the secret Hasbro space weapon that will evaporate all the water in the oceans. Signed, Jeremy Crawford, Wizards of the Coast." Okay, folks, so I don't think he's bluffing, because, I mean, we've all suspected that Hasbro has a space weapon that will evaporate all the water in the oceans, and I never thought they would use it, until now. So please make sure to subscribe. The survival of the entire planet may depend on it. So let's go through the Wizard, and we're going to start with the design notes. You can now use your spellbook as an arcane focus. The rules for your spellbook have been consolidated, and there's a new first level spell called Scribe Spell. Academic is a new second level feature. Arcane Recovery has been bumped from first level to second level. Memorize Spell is a new 5th level feature. Modify Spell is a new 7th level feature. Create Spell is a new 9th level feature. Spell Mastery is now gained at 15th level instead of 18th level. Signature Spells has moved from 20th level to 18th level, and they get an epic boon at level 20. If we look at the class chart, it's mostly the same, except now prepared spells are set. The current version allows prepared spells equal to your level plus your intelligence modifier, so likely at level 1 you have 4 spells that you can prepare, which is going to match what you're going to have here. But if we look at level 20, the current wizard should have 25 prepared spells. I mean, I would assume you could have an intelligence 20 by 20th level. The playtest wizard here, though, has only 22 spells, so we are going to be preparing fewer spells at higher levels. There's a small change to proficiencies. The old wizard is proficient in daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows. Now they just get all simple weapons. Obviously, it's easier to keep track of, and I never really understood the reason, either thematic or mechanical, that a wizard should be proficient in light crossbows, but not in short bows. The multiclass rules for wizard are unchanged, and the spellcasting rules for the wizard are basically the same as 5th edition, except being able to use your spellbook as a focus, which is very much a ribbon feature. You still prepare spells from your spellbook, you can still switch them after long rest, you still don't get the entire spell list. You start with 6 first level spells. That's the same, except now instead of choosing from a wizard class list, you're using the arcane list, which is very much like the previous wizard list. And each time we level up, we get 2 additional spells of our choice, though now we do get some built-in spells. The wizard retains the ability to cast any spell with the ritual tag from their spellbook without preparing it. Rules for creating additional spellbooks or replacing a lost spellbook are now included, but this is no change from the current rules, other than it references Scribe Spell as a way to create a new spellbook. Now, if you read this like me and thought maybe this new spell, Scribe Spell, was going to allow you to replace a lost or destroyed spellbook with one containing the lost spells, unfortunately, no, that's not what Scribe Spell does. So let's look at Scribe Spell. It's a first level transmutation spell with the ritual tag, and basically, it's exactly what 5th edition wizards could do without a spell. So it's just the same procedure for copying spells into your spellbook, time required, same costs, same materials required. So although this is presented as a new spell, it's really just the same thing wizards have always been able to do with no enhancements or new restrictions. And what that means is, actually at level 1, the wizard has been nerfed pretty hard. With Arcane Recovery, a first level wizard can cast 3 first level spells per long rest. But with the playtest rules, now it's 2, and they're really getting nothing as a replacement. I mean, they can use their spellbook as a focus, but that's really more of a flavor thing. And I don't think that was necessary. I mean, yes, wizards have a reputation as the most powerful class in the game, but not at level 1. So I'll be encouraging them to put Arcane Recovery back to level 1. Level 1 is tough enough for wizards, just like every other class, and they don't need to be worse. At 2nd level, the wizard gets the Academic feature, which lets you take the study action with advantage on any intelligence check. Of course, the study action is always going to be intelligence checks anyways. Just as a reminder, the study action allows the character to make Arcana, History, Investigation, Nature, or Religion checks to uncover knowledge about the things that you would think those skills would uncover knowledge about. So, like you face a black dragon and you want to know if your character would know anything about black dragons. The DEM has you take the study action and make a nature roll, and with a success, they might tell you that, black dragons are swamp dwellers that breathe acid, or something like that. I'm glad this is here, but these kinds of checks have taken a hard nerf as well, because at least in my experience, DM's never made it use my action before, but now it does. And then Arcane Recovery works as it did before, except now we get it at level 2 instead of level 1. At level 3 we choose our subclass, and I'll be covering the included Evoker subclass after we go over the base class. Level 4 we get a feat, then at level 5 we get a new spell that's automatically added to our spellbook, Memorize Spell, so let's take a look. So this spell takes a minute to cast, and it has the ritual tag, so you can take the 10 minutes and it won't cost a spell slot. Otherwise it's a 3rd level spell. It allows you to switch one of your prepared spells, so if you have Fireball prepared and then realize that everything you're facing is immune to fire, you might take out time to cast this ritual and prepare, Fly instead. You can cast Memorize Spell again, but if you do, your first switch is lost. So if you then switch Wall of Fire to Polymorph, then you would lose the preparation of Fly and you would regain Fireball. You can get around this by casting Memorize Spell at a higher level, as each additional spell slot level allows you to replace an additional spell. However, since you can't upcast spells with rituals, this means you would have to actually use a high level slot to achieve this. I like this spell. This is a modest benefit, but it does really fit the thematics of the wizard. I don't see upcasting this or even casting it non-ritually very often, as it is pretty high level for the benefit. But as a ritual, I could see doing this here or there to tweak my prepared spell list. At level 6 we get a subclass feature, and then at level 7 we have unlocked the secrets of Modify Spell, which is added to our spellbook. So now we're going to get into the meat of the new wizard and what it can do. Modify Spell is a 4th level transmutation spell with the ritual tag. If we don't cast this ritually, it's a minute to cast. It says, using arcane formulas in your spellbook, you magically alter one arcane spell you have prepared, you can change the spell's color, sound, and smell, and you can make one mechanical alteration to the spell. Any modification you make to the spell lasts until you cast Modify Spell again, or you complete a long rest. And this can be upcast with a 5th or higher level spell slot, and each additional slot level allows you to make one additional modification. And the modifications we can choose from are, we can remove one component of the spell, verbal, somatic, or material, though you can't remove the material components of a spell if the material component is normally consumed. You can make it so your concentration can't be broken by damage while you're concentrating on the modified spell. You can replace the damage type of the spell as long as the original damage type was either acid, cold, fire, lightning, necrotic, poison, or thunder, and then you can switch the damage type to any other on the list. And if the original spell does multiple types of damage, then you only switch one of them. You can increase the range of any spell that has a range of at least 5 feet and doesn't have a range of self by 30 times your wizard level in feet. You can add the ritual tag to a spell as long as the initial casting time is 10 minutes or longer. And last, but certainly not least, if a spell affects one or more creatures and doesn't have a range of self, it now affects only your allies or your enemies, your choice, as you modify the spell. And there's a lot to talk about here. This is a dramatic feature. It also ties together with another upcoming feature, and combined, they are the biggest changes to the wizard. So I will be doing a deeper dive into exactly what can be achieved with this and what this means for wizards once we go through all the features for both the wizard base class and the evoker subclass. At 8th level we get a feat, and then at 9th level we've unlocked the secrets of Create Spell, another wizard only spell, and this is the one that ties together with Modify Spell. So this is a 5th level spell, and it does not have the ritual tag. It's cast as a reaction when we cast Modify Spell. It has a costly component, and that component is consumed when we cast a spell, and the cost is 1,000 gold pieces per level of the spell altered by Modify Spell. And here's what Create Spell does. So you cast Modify Spell to alter the Fireball spell to, let's say, have it do thunder damage instead. Then you would cast Create Spell as a reaction, and you would expend a 3,000 gold piece Arcane Focus. Then you need to concentrate on Create Spell for an hour. Then within 10 minutes of completing the 1 hour concentration, then you can cast Scribe Spell and copy the new Thunder Damage Fireball spell into your spellbook. The new spell is no longer an arcane spell, it's a wizard-only spell, and you can now prepare it just like any of your other spells. So in theory, you could have Fireball, Acid Ball, Lightning Ball, and Cold Ball, and you could prepare all 4 of them if you have the preparations to do so. 10th level, a subclass feature is gained, then at 12th level, a feat is gained, at 14th level, a subclass feature is gained, and then at 15th level, we get Spell Mastery. Other than the change from this previously being an 18th level feature, this is the same as the current version. So you pick a 1st and 2nd level spell that are in your spellbook, and you can cast them at their lowest level without expending a spell slot as long as you have them prepared, and by spending 8 hours, you can switch them out for different 1st level or 2nd level spells. And by spending 8 hours, you can switch them out for different applicable selections. Then at 16th level, we get a feat. At 18th level, we get signature spells. This used to be the very underwhelming capstone for the wizard class, and it's basically unchanged here, other than it being gained at 18th level. The way it works is, you pick 2 of your 3rd level spells, and you always have them prepared, and you can cast them once at their lowest level, without expending a spell slot, once per short or long rest. Then at 19th level, there's a feat, and an epic boon at 20th level. But before giving my thoughts on the wizard, I am going to go over the Evoker subclass right away. So this subclass got a slight name change. It used to be the School of Evocation, and now it's the Evoker. And speaking of slight changes, it is pretty much the same as it always was. So Evocation Savant was always a throwaway, terrible feature that allowed you to copy evocation spells with a lower cost. And of course, if you actually picked evocation spells with your level ups, then the feature did nothing. We still get that part, but now we also choose 2 evocation spells at 2nd level or lower, and you get to add them to your spellbook for free in addition to the old benefit. And I'm on board for this. Evocation Savant was awful, and now it has some tangible benefit. It's still a ribbon feature, but it's a better ribbon. Then Sculpt Spells is basically the same, other than being bumped to 3rd level. So it lets you choose some creatures to automatically succeed on their saving throws against your evocation spells, and they take no damage if they would normally take half damage on a successful saving throw. So you can throw your fireballs with abandon and just exclude your allies. Now there are some notable limitations to this. First, you need to be able to see your allies, so if they're hiding or they're invisible, then you can't protect them. And also, you can't give this benefit to yourself. So if you throw a fireball at your feet, you're still taking damage. I've always thought Sculpt Spells was a good feature, and I'm satisfied with them not really changing it. So it occurs to me I should talk about the impact of moving the first subclass feature for the wizard from 2nd level to 3rd level. All the other subclass features that the wizard are going to get will be gained at the same level. And with the Evoker, I actually don't think it's that big a problem, because Sculpt Spells is a good feature, but it really gets more use at higher levels when you have bigger area of effect spells. When you're 2nd level, you're really casting area of effects like Thunder Wave, and it's just not that big, so it's not that hard usually to keep your allies out of the effect. So Sculpt Spells isn't going to come up very much. When Sculpt Spells really becomes effective is when we get those bigger spells, like when we get Fireball. Then Sculpt Spells is really good. However, this is the one subclass that's in this playtest, but we're going to have other wizard subclasses, and assuming they're going to be porting over existing subclasses and then modifying them for the next player's handbook, well, all their 2nd level features are going to become 3rd level features, and for some of them, it is going to be a really big impact, because some of those 2nd level features are great right at 2nd level. And so what we see with the wizard playtest here is that at level 1, the wizard is weaker because they don't have arcane recovery yet. And then at level 2, they will also be weaker because they don't have their first subclass feature. Then at level 3, they are going to catch up to the old wizard. And then it's really when they get Modify Spell. That's when we see things moving in the other direction. Potent Cantrip was not a good feature. You cast a cantrip that had a saving throw, and then the enemy still took half damage if they succeeded on the saving throw. They boosted a bit here now, so the creature takes half damage against any cantrip that does damage, including ones that involve spell attack rolls, though they suffer no additional effects. Still not a great feature, but it is better than it was. Empowered Evocation is worded slightly differently, but it's basically the same as it was before. You can add your intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of a spell. One thing to note here is it specifies spells from the arcane spell list, so wizard exclusive spells, including any you created with create spell, wouldn't benefit from this. And then at 14th level, Overchannel is unchanged from the current edition, other than some small wording changes. And I noticed that Overchannel works on arcane or wizard spells, so this one would work with new spells you create. And that's the wizard and the evoker. So before I get into the big change, which is the modify spell and create spell, I want to talk about the rest, which is actually pretty close to the current edition. One thing that struck me is it's going to feel worse playing a low-level wizard. Arcane recovery at 2nd level is going to hurt at 1st level, and getting the subclass at 3rd level is really going to hurt at 2nd level. And all you really get in exchange is advantage on study actions. I don't think that nerf is necessary, because wizards might be the most powerful class in the game, but I don't think anyone out there is suggesting that's the case at levels 1 and 2. Wizards can get by at those levels, but they aren't overpowered. Where we actually see the boost here is at higher levels, so we have spell mastery and signature spells are gained at lower levels than before. Though honestly, it's not a big buff. These class features are actually kind of tiny compared to the real high-level wizard class features, which is the high-level spells. In our current edition, wizards are often recognized as the most powerful of any spellcaster. And here's why. They have the best class spell list, the flexibility of prepared spells over known spells, and their proficiency with ritual casting. I mean, it doesn't hurt that they have more subclasses as well, and most of those subclasses are really good. What I notice in this playtest is a lot of those advantages have been lost. For example, a sorcerer has the same spell list as wizards do now, and they can also cast spells ritually, something that previously they couldn't do. Wizards are still better ritual casters, but that gap has definitely narrowed. Warlocks too can cast rituals without needing an invocation and a specific pact, and they have access to the same spells as wizards. And warlocks still have invocations, and sorcerers still have metamagic and sorcery points. So in order for the wizard to even compete with metamagic and invocations, they really need to be given something, because having the best spell list and being able to cast ritually are no longer the counterpoints to these features. So modify spell and create spell are clearly intended to be the way that wizards can compete. And the comparisons to metamagic are pretty obvious. Sorcerers can enhance their spells on the fly using sorcery points. Wizards enhance their spells through study and work and preparation. In terms of class identity, I love that. This is a really thematic way to have wizards and sorcerers face the same problems in ways that fit the concepts of the classes. Sorcerers are imbued with magic that they can manipulate with their inner power. Wizards are book nerds. So I support the existence of modify spell and create spell. In fact, if wizards didn't have them and had nothing in return, I wonder why I'd play a wizard at all when a sorcerer pretty much does the same things but better. However, I don't think these spells can exist in the game as they are written. If you have been hearing online that these spells are broken, I'm going to add my vote in as well. These are indeed broken. Now, I don't think they're automatically game-breaking. I just think there are ways they can be used that are game-breaking. Like, for example, if a wizard was to use modify spell and remove a component from a spell, that's not really game-breaking. I mean, sorcerers can use metamagic and 1 sorcery point to remove all the components of a spell. So I don't see this breaking the game. We see it already, and it's not been a problem. What about concentration? So it says if the spell requires concentration, damage can't break your concentration on the spell. Is that going to break the game? Well, if we're talking about like 1 spell, and you can lose your concentration still by being incapacitated, which actually in optimization circles is probably the most common way to lose concentration, because we're all protecting our concentration with Warcaster and with Resilient Constitution, and we still lose concentration. So I don't really see that being a game-breaking thing either. And the damage type. I mean, it does basically the same thing as the Transmute spell metamagic, and that's 1 sorcery point. So I don't see that being a problem. What about range? Well, distance spell metamagic, 1 sorcery point, And distance spell metamagic's actually better because it also increases the range of your touch spells. So again, I don't see this being game breaking. What about adding the ritual tag? Well, this one's kind of hard to answer because there's actually not a lot of spells this even qualifies for. But for most of them, I look at them, and if they were rituals, I don't see it breaking games either. What about the final one, targets? So let's say we were to take Fireball and make it so it only affected our enemies. Would that break the game? I don't think so, because we have Careful Spell metamagic that would do the same thing, costs 1 sorcery point, and that doesn't break the game, so I don't think that would break the game either. Now, what if we add Create Spell? So now we can take this Enhanced Fireball and we can copy it into our spellbook and we can memorize it. Is that going to break the game? Well, they did put a barrier here, and that is the costly component. So if I'm playing in a game where I just can't use Create Spell very much, so maybe I have 1 or 2 created spells in my spellbook because I can't afford to do any others, then I still don't think this really breaks the game. But what if you do Create Spell a second time? So I've created this Fireball that only affects my enemies. We'll call it Fireball 2. What if I cast Modify Spell on Fireball 2 to have it do something else? Like maybe now it also does thunder damage, and then I create that spell, and then I modify it again, and I start taking away all the components of the spell, and I do Create Spell again. Well, that would be a problem, except you can't do that, because Modify Spell only works on arcane spells, and soon as we use Create Spell, it loses the arcane spell tag and gains the wizard spell tag, so it's no longer applicable. So that's also okay. So there's lots of ways where I think these aren't broken. But now let's talk about the ways that they are broken and why I think, as written, these absolutely cannot appear in the player's handbook. I have identified 5 ways I think these are broken. So there may be more, and playtesting may reveal more, maybe people have thought of more, but these are the 5 that I came up with. The first is the costly component of Create Spell. My assumption is the very high cost of using this spell is intended to be the barrier that prevents it from being abused. I don't think that's a good way to handle it. The amount of gold that player characters have access to can vary wildly from table to table. I get comments on videos all the time that highlight this. When discussing the Tasha's summoning spells, I remember suggesting that a 300 gold piece component that isn't consumed when you cast a spell, so it's a one-time 300 gold piece investment, shouldn't be a problem for 5th level or higher characters. I had several comments on those videos from players who said that 300 gold pieces was simply unattainable for their 5th level spellcaster. Well, those players are going to get screwed with Create Spell because they will never be able to cast it. Then at some other tables, player characters have all but unlimited funds and plenty of downtime. I've had these comments too when I talk about some of the more prohibitively costly components or the astronomical costs and downtime required to copy any reasonably high quantity of spells into a spellbook. All kinds of comments from viewers that these aren't barriers at all for them because basically they have unlimited funds and as much downtime as they want at their tables. Well, they are going to be able to have an entire preparation list of universally enhanced spells. Tying the restrictions on Create Spell to the costly component places the onus on the DM to keep it under control by moderating character wealth, something that previously wasn't nearly as imperative. But a stingy DM is going to mean wizards are far inferior to sorcerers who do these things with metamagic, while a generous DM means wizards will have free reign to modify and create better spells for every preparation spot they have, and that's a problem. The second issue I see is the ability to upcast Modify Spell. So if we upcast Modify Spell, we can enhance a spell with multiple modifications. Then we can cast Create Spell and create a new spell with multiple enhancements, and it's a spell of the same level. Metamagic, with a couple exceptions, has a limit of 1 metamagic enhancement per spell. And if I'm in downtime, I'm always upcasting Modify Spell as much as I can before creating the new spell. This could mean several enhancements on the newly created spell, and it's not increasing the cost or the level of the new spell at all, and that's no good. High-level wizards will be creating spells with ridiculous amounts of enhancements. The third issue I see is with ritual enhancement. Mirage Arcane rituals actually don't concern me. But casting Simulacrum twice per day without spell slots, that does kind of concern me. Now I have to assume, at least I sure hope, spells like Simulacrum will be significantly redesigned. But ensuring every 10-minute or higher casting time spell isn't abusable by this is a task I would rather the designers didn't place on themselves. The fourth issue I see is the potential stacking of spells. The current rules say the effects of different spells add together while the durations of those spells overlap. The effects of the same spell cast multiple times don't combine, however. Instead, the most potent effect, such as the highest bonus from those castings, applies while their durations overlap, or the most recent effect applies if the castings are equally potent and the durations overlap. So if I create a new spell, is that a loophole for this? Like if I was to create an enhanced version of haste and cast it on someone who was already hasted by someone else, do the effects now stack because my enhanced haste is a different spell? I don't know, but that's something that could be a problem if it can be done. And the fifth issue I see is with the target's enhancement. I assume this is supposed to compete with Careful Spell, but there is a wording difference here, and it's a problem. In my sorcerer analysis video when I was talking about Careful Spell, I mentioned the wording of saving throw. It says the chosen creature automatically succeeds on its saving throw against the spell. And with saving throw being written singularly, it suggests we're talking about one saving throw. Targets is written way more liberally. It doesn't reference saving throws at all. It just says you can have your allies unaffected by a spell. So if you cast Web with this enhancement, allies should be able to walk through the web without a saving throw, or even difficult terrain for the duration of the spell. That's a problem. If your allies aren't affected by your Wall of Force spell, which presumably means they could walk right through it, that's also a problem. What about Fog Cloud? If your allies aren't affected, then I would assume they can see through it. Problem. And why is it a problem? Why is it a problem if it's fun? Because I hear this about things that are broken all the time. I'll say something's broken and people say, but it's fun, so who cares? So I want to give a personal example of how Modify Spell wouldn't be fun for me, and I already have an example. So I will be playtesting 1D&D later this month. We planned it a little while ago, and I was asked what I was going to make, and we're playing at 7th level, and I thought, wouldn't mind giving the Barbarian a try. I think it's pretty good at 7th level. I'll do a Berserker Barbarian. And so I'm looking through my various options on how to build this character, and I realized that I have new options now with this playtest that I've never had before that could be effective. Like, when is the last time that I used a flail? Never. But sap is pretty cool because you can cause disadvantage on the next attack that creature makes. And I thought, if I'm using Reckless Attack to get advantage, and then I sap an enemy, and they have disadvantage, then that offsets that, and that's kind of nice. And then with Shield Master, which is a pretty good feat now, I can knock enemies prone with that. That'll be kind of nice too. And I'm thinking, so I'm attacking with advantage, I'm causing disadvantage on the enemies, I'm knocking them prone. I'm looking forward to play this, and I think it's actually even going to do decent damage with the new 1D&D playtest rules. And so I proposed this character, and then, we've been chatting for about a week after that, and then another player said, hey, good news, Marshals. You're all going to have advantage on all your attacks, and all attacks against you are going to be at disadvantage, and the enemies are usually going to be prone because I'm going to use Modify Spell on Sleet Storm so it doesn't affect my allies, and I will cast it at the beginning of every combat. And I thought, well, that takes everything cool my character could do and makes it completely redundant. Everything. And so I mentioned it to the player. I'm like, this is a bit of a problem for my character. So either I need to change my character or you need to change your character. Otherwise, there's no point in me even trying this. And he said, I don't mind changing my character. Now, he could have kept his character the same and used Modify Spell in a non-broken way. That was also an option. But by using it in a broken way, it was going to ruin fun. And that's what broken things do. They ruin fun. So these are all valid problems, and ultimately I come to the same conclusion as the majority of the online reaction, that these spells are game-breaking. So I guess the first question is it even worth trying to salvage these? I think it is. The idea of modifying spells and creating new spells in your spellbook does sound like a lot of fun, and I was immediately excited when I read these, and thinking how great it would be for my wizard to make their own spells without the DM involved. I see spells like Rary's Telepathic Bond, and Bigby's Hand, and Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound. I want spells named after my wizard that do cool things that other spellcasters can't do. So if it's worth salvaging, then can it be salvaged, and if so, how? Well, I figure it involves working through the problems that I discovered. Also, maybe I missed some issues. It is going to take some thought. Or maybe new problems will be discovered in playtesting. But let's start with what we've got. So on the screen are my proposed changes that I think would solve all the issues that I came up with. So let's go through them one at a time. So the first issue I mentioned was the costly component. Not a good barrier to prevent abuse of create spell. And so if we're going to fix that, I think we can't use the costly component. So if we're going to have a costly component, let's make it much smaller, but let's replace that barrier with a more controllable one. And what comes first to my mind is a spell created with create spell that's enhanced is one level higher. So a fireball that doesn't hurt your allies is a 4th level spell. There might be other controllable solutions, but that's the one that came to my mind right away. I think it's pretty simple. The second issue I identified is the ability to upcast modify spell and create a spell with unmodified spell level and multiple enhancements. And I think we can just work that into the first solution. Each upcast one spell level higher. So a fireball that doesn't hurt allies is 4th level. A fireball that doesn't hurt allies and does thunder damage would be 5th level. The third issue is the ritual enhancement. Looking further into this, there's actually not a lot of spells that even qualify for this enhancement. Maybe we just don't need it at all. It's not one of the more exciting enhancements anyways, so maybe we just get rid of it. The fourth issue is the potential stacking of spells, and this one is easy to fix. You just close the loophole. So you add a bit that specifies that a spell you make with create spell counts as the original for the purposes of stacking spell effects, and that pretty much takes care of it. And the fifth and final issue is the wording of the target's enhancement. So how would we make this non-abusable? Well, we already have careful spell metamagic, and it's fine, so we can just kind of copy it. If the spell requires a saving throw of creatures targeted by the spell, any targets of your choice automatically succeed on the saving throw against the spell, and they take no damage if they would normally take half damage on a successful save. Now this excludes the part about affecting only allies, but I have to tell you, I couldn't come up with a lot of ideas for spells that might affect enemies that I don't want to affect enemies. I came up with a couple examples, like maybe Globe of Invulnerability. That might be something that we don't want enemies to be able to take advantage of, but I came up with few enough ideas that I just don't think it would be a big problem to just leave that out. Anyways, those are the ideas I came up with. So I'm hoping they keep modifying create spell, but they cannot get into the new player's handbook as they're written here. And that is the Playtest Wizard. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.